All right, welcome back. Chad Broshears, the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. This channel is dedicated to understanding both where we're coming from and where we're going, and how to kind of relate to people. So with that, let's get started. All right. So what is really resonating right now, especially if for people that are looking into like more of the political spectrum and rights and all the rest of this, we do have what's referred to as the outrage culture. I've been informed that outrage culture is more of a derogative context towards people that are obviously trying to stand up for what they feel is unjust. Now, for me, being that I'm a psychology student and I do read often, and I prefer science, nonfiction literature over fiction, engaging with people in intelligent and deep conversations over, superficial, dramatic things that don't really have a much of an outcome aside from just maybe rapport building, and critiquing other people's like ideas. It's what drama is, and gossip. So try to come up with something out of that. So that's more my preference, is to have meaningful conversations in that sense. So with that, I've really been observing a lot here, social media and interacting with people as well, that there is people are referring to it as being triggered. For me, and also as in psychology, we look at it this way: is that when somebody is triggered, they're hijacked. They're emotionally unable to think away from what has them triggered. Right? They run and hide from it, but it still is in control, or they react to it, the fight or flight type of reaction. And what I've realized with this is that people are becoming more and more triggered, quote unquote, based off of what they're programming themselves with on their ideologies. And there's fewer and fewer people that are looking deeper and deeper into the situation. We're more polarized now than what I've noticed in my lifetime. And it could very well be that I'm just putting an eye on it. It could be the technology is bringing it to the surface a little bit easier. But, it's like there's a lot of manipulation that takes place, where a video, which a lot of people are watching videos versus reading now, or if they are reading, it's reading a interpretation from a journalist or somebody that is based off of the event they observed in a video that was released, that was already edited or polished or polarized. Where you get a video of a cop handling a suspect, and it starts at the point where there's force being used, and then somebody else chimes in, that person's innocent, or that person's not carrying a gun, there's no weapons, whatever. And they completely take out of the scenario what the cop is having to deal with, what they're authorized to do as far as force is concerned, the speculation on the side of the witness and them narrating it, or the individual who's narrating over the video. There's a lot that goes into that. It's not as common that it's truly raw footage. It's, let's start the video here because this helps my narrative more. This is, we've seen this in politics for a long time. We've seen it with celebrities. We've seen it with news, the news broadcasts, where they just spin it to their narrative and the base just listens. They take the consideration of the individual narrating it without much critical thinking. An interesting thing that I've also observed within the last 10 years is like this idea of an increased intellectual perspective and a quick response narrative, where somebody says something and the individual feels like they're already well informed because they've paid attention to that particular situation for so long that they feel like they're educated in it. And they very well could be educated in the edited version of that narrative, which is, like Fox, news and the right side, if you will, likes to paint a picture on the Democrats, if you will, or like CNN or MSNBC, what their takes are on things. And they do that exactly the same back at, like Fox, or other channels that, or news sources that would have that more the right-leaning perspective. Now, what I'm working on getting towards here is that individuals don't look as far into it, but they emotionally invest in it without necessarily understanding intellectually the situation at hand. So as soon as something comes up, it's like, well, I now need to represent my tribe. I need to represent my party. And I need to prove other people wrong. So some of the things that come out of that group mentality is there's a bonding experience that takes place when other people share your ideas. Then there is a hierarchy of placement where you feel like you've vindicated that idea to a point where now you represent your party in a more structured and solidified position, and that you did the right thing because it's under the guise of what you understand of what the situation is. You feel what is right or wrong based on that. So I feel that this was right because of the information that I have given myself or that have been given that makes me understand the situation. So therefore you don't understand it. And it creates more cognitive dissonance. For people that aren't aware of what cognitive dissonance is when you have two opposing ideas that affect you at the same time, that creates a uncomfortable scenario where it's easier for your brain to process by dismissing it than to continue to compare these two opposing ideas to the point of coming up with a resolution. It's an uncomfortable place to be. Most people have experienced it. I know I've experienced it quite a bit as cherished beliefs were put against other ideas with new information. It's one thing that I absolutely am grateful for when it comes to the scientific method is that science likes to measure the realities of things, and there's other people out with the intention of proving you wrong to further their own awareness and potentially create a degree of notoriety. Now, that's how science works. It's constantly trying to prove itself wrong. It's even researchers try to prove themselves wrong consistently, because the scientific method asks for that. Doesn't mean that there's never bias in science. It's just, it's less likely to occur there than it is in the political spectrum or in the layperson spectrum. So what happens in these scenarios is we get these, like, we arm ourselves with what's going to happen in the future. We look at, well, I am a representative of the, Democratic Party, if you will. There is going to be a specific amount of information that's out there that's regularly repeated to the point of, when you look at it again in the sciences, is brainwashing. If you continue to only consume a specific information for so long, you're programming yourself with that information. You're now narrowing down your field or your scope of view on that with the more you identify yourself with that particular information. It's a process. The more you specifically look into something, and I'm certain that you've come across this as you're educating yourself in something, the world starts to occur through the lens of that education. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Doesn't mean it's a good thing. It's just a thing. It's what we do. And when we focus intently on one particular area, the more likely we are to become obsessed with it, or we develop attachments to it to the point that it's now becoming part of who we are as a person. And then it's going around looking at the world through that, and you're looking for things to validate it, because you're not going to want to take in information that has useless value. You're going to want to have a usefulness to what you're learning. So it's bringing that into conversations. I'm certain that you've had, conversations with friends, family, whomever, with someone else, and it seems like they've, out of context, applied something to the conversation. It's like, where did you come up with that? I wasn't saying anything about it. That wasn't even in the scope of our conversation. It's like the person just manifested it out of thin air. There's a good deal of the time that's because of that auto programming or self-programming. That's more where that commonly would come from. So we do this to ourselves all the time. It's, through the idea of racism, the idea of social injustices, whatever the ideology is that's kind of seeping its way into your worldview. It's not that those things are wrong. It's not that they're right. It's just be aware of it. It'll have a cost. It'll have a benefit. So what I'd like to focus on in this video in particular, I'll hit the benefits, and this is not an all-encompassing benefit. It's not anything like that. What this is it's just an overview. Now, with that, I'll hit the benefits. The benefits can be with the outrage culture is if you've seen something for so long, you truly believe that it's an injustice, and your actions help start changing a policy or changing something that's involved with that outrage or that thing, that subject that's caused you to be excited enough to react. You might make change in that. You might not, but you might. And the benefit could be that, you've made change on a bigger scope, right? Like history will now change. The direction of humanity can change because of that. And history would look at it as this is a hingent point, and you had something to do with it, much like, the Vietnam War and how we had all these protesters. There's a lot of injustices that have happened to our soldiers, not just to foreign, individuals and, to spectators and the rest of that. So there's that piece. Then there's also the benefit of being right in your local groups. Now, with that, you can start trimming people out of your social sphere of influence based off of them having opposing ideologies, and that can feel like a benefit to you. Long-term consequences of that type of behavior is you can create echo chambers or accelerators. And you have to be cautious to those things because echo chambers create sycophants, and you become a sycophant yourself in those echo chambers where you agree so that you don't go against the grain. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but it's very high likelihood in an echo chamber that occurs. For people that aren't aware of what echo chambers are, so an echo chamber is where other people share your view, and it's a continuous back and forth of the same thing or breeding of those ideas into larger spectrums, but yet they're still in the same vein of things that don't face opposition of thought. Now, it's always a better thing to have people that oppose your thoughts enough that it makes you look at that critically and potentially come up with a more well-rounded idea of that subject, that situation. But when cognitive dissonance sets in situations like that, it's so uncomfortable, it makes you want to push those people out of that circle because it's not as comfortable as having people agree with you. So it's an interesting dynamic, but those can be considered to be benefits, that you feel right, that you feel validated, vindicated, you feel like you're part of a larger thing, you feel like you've made a difference. Benefits. Now, costs are the other side, obviously, and everything has a cost-benefit analysis. If you aren't aware of a cost-benefit analysis, it's time to put some critical thinking into that. So with the cost to the situations like this, we've all experienced somebody that needs to be right over getting along with people. Doesn't mean that they are right in the empirical sense, but they can share the other ideas of people within that group or that area, or a dominance of those people in that area in a way that makes them feel like they're standing up for, they are part of that in group of injustice, if you will, something that makes them feel purposeful. Then you'll have so that could be a cost because it separates people from you. It moves people away when you need to be right over connecting, and being able to just go into what is, a well-rounded view or a bigger view of yourself or the world that you're existing in. That can be a dangerous thing because it starts pushing people out of your life. And people that can be contributions to your life over time, or you being a contribution to them, all for the opportunity to be right. You'll have this. So that's on a social perspective. That's one of the dangers. The other costs are organizing groups that say that they're against hate, but they use hate as a way, or aggression as a way of proving that they're not for hate. So misery loves company, but like emotions, or emotions like each other that are similar. You don't have to have misery that has misery involved as a compounding factor, although emotions like that because it's relatable and you feel like you're not alone when those things occur. But there's also the hostilities that come with it. So anger creates other things, social distress, frustration, hostility. There's other things that come with anger. They breed together. They also become pretty much like self-fulfilling prophecies. That person has done X. I can prove they're going to do X. And then you look for the evidence to conclude that X has been done. but through more of a hostile means. It doesn't always have to be hostile, but it can still breed to that point. Because with what you share your ideas today with another person in a social sense, you have a responsibility to relay that information as best as possible so that the other person doesn't half hear you to the point that it makes them feel validated, even though their ideas are now excited into something that's not what you were originally trying to convey. That now that idea has become, that person goes off and hurts somebody, and you did not want that. You just wanted to there's a perspective that you were out to actually get that person to understand. And what happens is that individual understands it to the level that you relate it because you didn't sink in well enough. And that other person says, you know what, now somebody else agrees with me, and let me move this further down the pipeline of aggression, frustration. And let's get this in a diluted sense without realizing that it's a diluted sense, like the game of telephone. And now that person's going to go and excite another individual. And then numbers, and this is in sociology, numbers start to create movements of mentality. You can see this for the people that are willing to study what happened in Germany under the Third Reich, the Nazi Party, Hitler. People that are willing to study it right now, if you say I've studied it, people have an idea that you're now a racist or a Nazi because you studied it. It's just insanity to me. Study history; it has value. But anyway, that's my own little soapbox moment, because it is something I've seen that absolutely just blows my mind of what ignorance will make someone do, and how it shuts people down. Study things, read things, learn things. Safe spaces are not safe spaces, unfortunately, for a lot of people, because safe spaces push you out. That's another idea of those echo chambers. And I've seen a lot of aggression or hostility to create a safe space. This isn't a safe space because your ideas conflict with my ideas, and I don't feel like my ideas can be expressed in this area because you have one that opposes mine, and that's uncomfortable. That's a dangerous element because it breeds more of those things. Those actually become echo chambers to accelerators. And accelerators are, an echo chamber on steroids, basically, that really push the ideologies out into the world in such a way, like you'll form groups like Antifa. People may be upset with me on this or not, but what they stand for and what their actions are, the statement is Antifa is against fascism, but that's a fascist movement. Fascism under the understanding that it is to suppress another understanding in a way that everyone has the same belief system is what fascism is overall, although the definition in the dictionary actually has to do with Nazism and fascist movement there. But, Mussolini was a fascist, though, and he was tied to the Nazi party, but he was not a Nazi. He was Mussolini, and he was the representative in Italy. Anyway, that's a digression. So cost to these things, you can see that these costs can become pretty magnificent. They're not always on a low level where it's just an individual cost that they can recover from. It can change who you are long term. So that's on the sociology of it, or the social grouping of it. On a individual level, the dangers of being part of that outrage culture, if you look at it from physiology, is we already have cortisol in our body. It's our waking, moving hormone. Melatonin is the opposite side, which is a rest recovery hormone. What happens whenever you infuse frustration into your life? You create those stress hormones. It can lead to premature aging, both in the skin, your look, as well as your visceral system and your health. It can cause all kinds of different disruptions when it's out of balance. And most people are already in a fight or flight, sympathetic, more system, and the autonomic system. They're more stimulated in that. The less time you have in the parasympathetic system, which is your rest recovery portion, the less time you have there, the less you rebuild and repair your body. So if you're psychologically stimulating yourself in such a way you feel like injustices are being done, and you're not giving yourself a reprieve for recovery through the parasympathetic system, it's going to reduce your recovery values. And if you don't recover today, my dog's celebrating herself back there right now. If you don't recover yourself today, you're going to pay a cost for it tomorrow. It may be so minute that you don't really recognize it, aside from, I probably need a little more caffeine to function today. Long term to that, though, is it can wear your body out to the point that you develop chronic fatigue or other issues that can lead to dis-ease, or as we refer to in the West, disease. It can lead to those kind of things because you're not recovering well enough. Also, in the psychological element of it, you can create the gateways to mental illness. Because if you don't have opposing viewpoints and you create an environment that doesn't allow for conflict, nature will not allow that bubble of influence or that sphere of influence that's being created. Nature will not allow that to maintain itself without conflict. So we can psychologically build a circle around us that doesn't allow much conflict. But as soon as nature brings it in, because it will do it, you cannot control nature to that level, at least at this stage of our development and our evolution. So you create the safety space where everyone around you is agreeing with you, and you become more sensitive to these things, and you retreat. I just can't tolerate this. I can't do this right now. You're creating a softer version of yourself that is less equipped to dealing with life. So when life comes along and says, I don't care about what you prefer, this is going to happen. Somebody stricken with a terminal illness, surprise death in the family. One of your friends gets radicalized and they go in another direction that's not in your sphere. And now you've lost that person and they become an out-group enemy. Before you know it, you might find yourself so isolated that you are your own person on an island surrounded by people that don't relate to you. And they become, all of these people are aggressors towards you in your mind. Paranoia can set in, things like that. You know, it takes 6 months of consistent stress to move you towards a depressed state, which is general anxiety disorder. That is a stage of mental illness. We can create these things in ourselves. So with that, that's the psychological, physiological, and social costs to being in that outrage. So being centered, hearing where other people are, what they're going through. To put a label on somebody, and I've shared this in another video, where if you label them anything, you can use that, and you may not mean to, but I've seen a lot of people that you can see that that was their intention based off of their behaviors, where let's say they label the person as a racist. That's it's a fashionable term right now that's being thrown around left and right. It's reducing the benefit of the word or the value of the word with its truth. It's reducing it or watering it down to the point that it's just, call anybody a racist who doesn't agree with you. You know, you can see that where one person calls another group a racist, or, you know, it's silly where you see these kind of things. But anyway, it's fascinating to me when people do things like that, because there's an intention behind putting the label on someone where it is intended to trump that person, to say, you're not allowed to talk anymore. I have just stripped you of your credibility because you have a very unfashionable belief about the world and the race superiority of individuals. I've labeled you that way. What you have to say after that is valueless or non-valuable. It's an intended trump card, calling a guy or somebody a misogynist. I've seen women call women misogynist as well, whatever. To call them a misogynist is in the same vein of behavior. If it's true, it's true. But I've seen more frequently than not, based off of looking into the situations and the individual's ideologies and what they stand for, where it is just an intended scarlet letter. Separate from that person, move away from them. They're bad people. Don't listen to them. They have bad, caustic ideas. They're chaotic, whatever. And it can be dangerous in that sense as well. So watch out for those things. And if you catch yourself wanting to use that terminology, do a critical analysis of the situation. Find out if it's truly your idea or what you've been feeding yourself lately. Now, intellectually feeding yourself. Have you been programming yourself to believe the world be that way? So these things cause separation. You know, to want to bring us together would be stop throwing around terminology that is intended to stop people in conversation. Stop looking at things at that superficial level. If you haven't put critical analysis into something, critical analysis is a very interesting and valuable thing about life. Put it into your life. If you feel like you're getting emotionally triggered over something, apply critical analysis right there. What are my beliefs? What are the beliefs of the individual that is being the bad person in the situation that is just emotionally excited me? What is it about that situation that I should look into? What's the other story? What's the other side? What is that person thinking? Oh, and I'll close on this because I do think it's valuable to close with it. Is I was asked, I had asked somebody their definition of racism. The definition that I was given is actually imperialism. It had little to do with race, and it had to do with majority values. I know that some of the universities are starting to teach this. It's not right. It's not linguistically sound. It is an adaptation to fit a narrative. It all has to do with just separation based. So racism is a separation based off of race. It has to do with an idea of superiority over another person's inferiority based off of the fact of their race. That's it. It's a very simple definition. So I was told that it was imperialism, and I corrected the statement. It's like, well, that actually is a definition for imperialism, not racism. And then I'd asked the question, can people be racist against white people? And I was told, no, can't be racist against white people. It's like, well, by its definition, yes, you can. It's a simple thing, but right now it's fashionable to throw the term around. Let's look at it with some critical analysis. Okay. No, the cops aren't out to kill people. They prefer not to. Of course, you will have the outliners. Every single event, experience in life where people are involved, there's always going to be an outliner or an outlier. You're always going to find that. But when you bastardize an entire group of people based off of outliers, you're doing a disservice to yourself, to the individuals that are in charge of those situations. You're just doing an injustice. Look deeper at it. Do critical analysis. Try to get as deep as you can and try to get out of the political party that you find yourself in or the social groups that you have, whatever that might be. Get out of those scenarios so that you can at least hear something from another perspective. Do it. Though I was politically, if you had to put me into a group, I was more left-centered, not really a liberal, but just left, or liberal ideologies, but not like what we see, like Antifa and stuff like that. Since then, now I have been more labeled towards the right, just because I don't share the radical perspectives, and I don't want those things to come to fruition because I feel that that's a direct connection to fascism. I don't want imperialism or fascism. I don't want any of that. I'd rather that we live in an idealistic democracy where we all can actually have say-so and value and be heard out and be more Socratesian in our approach than this, V for vendetta type of approach to things where, it's gotten a little out of hand. So there are cost and benefits, add to, take away, please, I'm always open to conversation. I want to see the world from different perspectives. That's what growing up in the wilds of suburbia is all about. Bring your perspective to this. Come to it with an open mind and an open conversation. Let's go into it with open dialogue. Don't ask an opinion, hear the person out, then say, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Hear it out. Don't deny conversation. So with that, my preference is that we all come together in these conversations in a way that we can walk away going, I better understand the situation. Perhaps it doesn't change my view, but at least it gives me an insight to yours. That's what it's about. So with that, this is Chad Broshears, again, the host with Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. If you like the video, please, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, notifications. It'll tell you whenever I've got a video coming up or when I've gone live or when I've put one out. Also comment, share it with a friend. All right. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of it. Let's look at life as critically as we can. I'm in no way saying that I'm perfection, but damn it, I want to improve every day. And I really hope that you follow me in that venture. So enjoy, and I will see you guys soon.